Arriving in New York, Rita Hayworth, film queen who became a real-life princess by marrying the heir of the fabulous Aga Khan, wants only a hot dog.
I'm thrilled to be back home again, and I'm most grateful for the very warm reception that you all have given me. And, of course, I'm most anxious for my children to see America. And, you know, the first thing I'm going to do is go out and get myself a hot dog.
At Oakland, the National Guardsmen of California's own 40th Division have some donuts and coffee before becoming the first troops to answer General MacArthur's recent call for 20,000 additional men. Civilian soldiers who pack their music makers with their guns, they embark for the long voyage to the war zone. Major General Daniel Huddleston is the commanding officer of these guardsmen who go forth to battle communism in Asia. And it's farewell to the Golden Gate for these lads for quite a spell. Still maintaining secrecy about its overall capabilities, the Navy at Grand Prairie, Texas allows Movietone News to film its newest skyfighter, a chance-bought twin-jet Cutlass. Looking somewhat like a guided missile, it is said to be fast enough to pierce the supersonic wall, at the same time being able to take off from an airplane carrier with exceptionally heavy loads. Test pilot Lieutenant John Tyan is at the controls for its public debut.
The start of the annual motorcycle mud race near Seattle, Washington, and all you need is a fast cycle, lots of endurance, and a pair of water wings. A 20-lap affair over a mile course through mud, water, and whatever else Mother Nature decides to use. Now, here's a guy who's not making too much headway, as the fans view it from the trees. And the winner, Red Farrell, a native Washingtonian who wraps it up in 47 minutes. Mud in your eye, yes, but let's stop there. Outboard enthusiasts taking part in the annual Sammamish race in the state of Washington. One of the crookedest creeks in the nation with a turn every other foot. Imagine 17 miles of this. Hard to tell whether it's fair or foul, but seems just a trifle foul at the moment. To the hills, Bossy, and Mom, not too much starch in those shirts. What's par for the course? You're right, 3 strokes and a daredevil driver.
Most explosive area in world affairs, Iran's nationalized oil fields. Long envied by the USSR, the nationalization of the rich fields has set off a bitter dispute between Iran and Britain, precipitating another delicate crisis in the all-too-troubled international scene. Nullifying a concession to the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company in which the British government has a 50% interest, Iran's action is considered a breach of contract by the English. 1/5 of the world's oil supply is involved. The whole effort of the United States to aid the free world depends on abundant oil. Trouble in Iran affects all our plans. For this reason, we are acting as arbiters in an effort to find grounds for amicable settlement. But the Kremlin is delighted by the dispute, and native communists are using it to stir up trouble. making retreat as costly as advance. Marine Corps Corsairs and Air Force jets pound a fleeing Chinese communist concentration in North Korea with consuming jelly bombs. While a bridge providing an escape route is rendered useless. Strikes that add attrition to defeat. After a flight across the Pacific, Captain James Jabara is welcomed home by General Joe Kelly, commander of California's Travis Field. But it is wife Nina who gets the hero's salute. Captain Jabara is the world's first jet airplane ace, a distinction won by downing 6 Russian MiGs over Korea. A good man in a pinch or clinch, Captain Jabara. Vanguards of the first American reinforcements for Europe since the end of World War II. 1,300 GIs of the 4th Division land at Bremerhaven, Germany. Greeted by high-ranking Allied officers, the infantrymen are hailed as guardians of liberty, while accorded a welcome usually reserved for conquering heroes. A solo achievement that thrilled the world comes to an end at New York's International Airport as Captain Charlie Blair steps from his souped-up Mustang fighter to become aviation's newest long-distance flight champion. He has just completed a 2-hop transpolar flight from Norway to Alaska to New York, a 6,750-mile journey that makes him the only known man to have soloed over the pole. On hand to greet the conqueror was his year-old son Christopher and wife Janice, from whom he gets a proper accolade. A Florida co-ed, Frida Coupland, is the 1951 color girl at the Naval Academy, and with midshipman James Winnefeld in rapt attendance, makes the traditional transfer of the colors after a manner instituted at Annapolis in 1871. The kiss is for his company's victory that made possible her selection. Midshipman William David Shaughnessy of Waltham, Massachusetts, is the class honor man. As June week festivities make Worden Field and environs scenes of memorable moments.
Betty Jameson tees off in the Weather Vane Golf Tournament. Patty Berg next at Knollwood Country Club, White Plains, New York. Now Marlene Bauer and her sister Alice. Louise Suggs. Teeing up to tee off, Babe Didrikson Zaharias. Hiya, Babe. Rain descends as Mrs. Zaharias and Patty Berg battle for top honors, and the Babe is bothered by the downpour, which eventually forces postponement of the final round. On the replay of the last 18 holes, Patty's putter goes a-sputter at a time when victory is in sight. Babe sinks a short one on the 18th for a title tie, as Patty performs perfectly here, too. Now they'll play off for the $5,000 first prize and to see who cops the cup. It's Derby Day at Epsom Downs, and the vast throng is in a gay mood, enhanced by the colorful track tipsters and barkers. Bobbies protect the people, but at post time, the horses run wild. 33 thoroughbreds are off and running in the famed English Derby. It's a wide-open race in this 172nd renewal of the renowned Turf Classic. Top 3-year-olds pounding over a 1.5-mile course with the 9-to-1 favorite Key Ming at the front, along with Mystery the Ninth and long shot Arctic Prince held at 50-to-1. Around tough Tatnam Corner into the home stretch, Arctic Prince pulls away with a surprising burst of speed to lead Sybil's Nephew and Signal Box, and the winner by 6 lengths, Irish-owned Arctic Prince. 33 super speedsters roll away in the 36th running of the 500-mile Memorial Day Automobile Racing Classic at Indianapolis. Daring drivers bearing down on throbbing throttles, 200 laps to a $200,000 jackpot, but few ever finish. Gee whiz, it's a near-killing pace. Maury Rose spins and turns over. But the 3-time winner wins this skirmish with tragedy. Zooming to victory in record-toppling time, Lee Wallard. 3 hours, 57 minutes, 38 seconds for 500 miles, averaging better than 126 miles an hour. Worth a wifely smack as Loretta Young looks on, and $60,000 in prize money. Some speed.
Worst scandal ever to sully the ivied halls of West Point swirls eddies of dismay around the heroic figure of Colonel Thayer, father of the Academy and founder of its sacred honor system. Where integrity must be beyond question, 90 cadets stand charged with cribbing, a practice conceived to aid football players who fell behind in their studies. But though many star athletes are involved, there must be no compromise on honor, says Cadet Burke.
I was greatly shocked to hear of this violation of the honor code of the Corps of Cadets. However, although it means the dismissal of these men, I feel that the code of the Corps of Cadets must be maintained.
Mortified groups discuss the disgrace to their beloved institution as Cadet Gerdner explains its honor system.
This is a code of ethics administered by the Corps of Cadets, which demands that no cadet shall lie, cheat, nor steal.
Cadet Regimental Commander William Gages has this to say.
Although I have no personal knowledge of the details, there can be no leniency towards violators of the Cadet Honor Code. Whether it be one man or whether it be 90 men, no violator is ever granted immunity.
Overwhelmed by the disclosures, football coach Blake withholds comment till all the facts are in. While chagrined though they be, no scandal will stop these 2,200 lads from carrying on in the Point's finest tradition, with the nation all for them. Bald-headed, pudgy, and bespectacled, Waxy Gordon at left, notorious New York City criminal, is again in the hands of the police. This time as the czar of a narcotics ring that police say did an annual business that ran into the millions. Caught with the goods, the infamous and feared Prohibition Days gangster is held in $250,000 bail. Crowds totaling 200,000 line the approaches to Niagara Falls to see Riverman Red Hill in this flimsy oval of inner tubes challenge the power of the mighty cataract. Only tape and netting hold the contraption together, but Daredevil Hill has faith in its buoyancy as he's towed for his perilous plunge. Watchers from the shore search the cascading cliff to see the drop, but the expected thrill becomes a horror when the battered barrel is discovered rent and torn on the angry waters. Broken and twisted, it floats in the foam, its pilot beaten to death on the rocks beneath the falls. A day later, the body was recovered. Moving day at one of Rome's antiquarian museums brings to the streets of the Eternal City a sight not seen for 100 years. The private railroad equipage of Pope Pius IX, the pontiff who reigned a century ago. The observation car contains a special throne from which His Holiness of the 1850s could view the then more spacious domains of the Vatican State. The cars have been museum pieces since the unification of Italy, when the Italian government took over many of the Vatican State's acres.
Gold Cup races on Lake Washington near Seattle. The world's fastest speedboat zooming along, headed by Slow Motion the Fifth. Flirting with nearly 100-mile-an-hour speeds, these supercharged water wonders send up a sizzling spray. As the fleet craft skim the surface, the pace becomes perilous. The crowd is is tense, and disaster strikes as the Quicksilver blows up. All boats are flagged down. All that's left of the boat and 2 pilots in the tragic occurrence. Slow Motion the Fifth, having won the first 2 heats, is declared the winner of the shortened event. Gold Cup winner Slow Motion the Fifth, but first with the fastest. Beverly Hansen tees off in the Tam O'Shanter All-American Golf Tournament in Chicago. Betty Rawls drives. Now Louise Sugg swings. And here's Babe Didrikson Zaharias. Another favorite, Patty Berg. Miss Hansen is mighty nigh perfect with her putter. Patty Berg figures this almost a sure shot, but the shot isn't so sure. The Babe thrills the fans with this mighty long effort. A mighty miss with a near miss. But the best woman golfer of them all really has the right touch in the clutch, and she takes the title. Nice going, Babe. Gertrude Ederle receives a trophy at New York City Hall commemorating the 25th anniversary of her being the first woman to swim the English Channel. Here she is 25 years ago, getting ready to attempt her now historic feat, getting grease to withstand the cold water. Another highlight, Gertrude Ederle actually swimming the channel, and here getting some nourishment. New York hailed the return of the conquering heroine, whose record of 14 hours and 31 minutes was not broken until last year. Thanks for a wonderful memory, Gertrude.
In spite of Soviet Russia's attempt to wreck it, the San Francisco Japanese Peace Treaty Conference, attended by 52 nations, moves to a successful conclusion. Final hours highlighted by John Dulles exposing Soviet plans to make the Japan Sea a Russian lake. Congressman Armstrong's presentation to Gromyko of a map showing all the slave camps in the USSR, quickly discarded by his aide. The New Zealand delegate, Sir Carl Berenson's dramatic statement of a fact the Russians overlook.
The United States, with the full cooperation of the United Kingdom, of Australia, New Zealand, and other members of the British Commonwealth, fought the Japanese for 4 years, and the Soviet Union fought them for 6 days.
A bit of blatant hypocrisy by the Polish delegate getting the treatment it deserves.
A great Englishman once said that to preach freedom of discussion is not enough. You have to practice it. If you don't practice it...
So, treaty sponsored by Britain and the United States succeeds as the signing begins. A triumph for Mr. Atchison the Russians couldn't bear to witness. They deserted the parley. For the Argentine, the Commonwealth of Australia, the Dominion of Canada, La Belle France, Communist defeater Greece, the Philippine Islands, the United Kingdom, the United States, and finally Japan. Mr. Dulles and Secretary Atchison deserve the plaudits of their country and the free world. 5 hours later at San Francisco's Presidio, Secretary Atchison and his loyal bipartisan spokesman, Mr. Dulles, with Premier Yoshida of Japan, compound the diplomatic victory scored at the Peace Treaty Conference. In the hall of the headquarters of the Sixth Army, they assembled to conclude a mutual defense pact between the United States and Japan. Mr. Atchison signs for the United States, while his prototype from across the Pacific, Premier Yoshida, signs for his empire. Former enemies becoming allies in a security pact against communist aggression in the Far East. Accepting the city's salute in Cleveland, Ohio, General MacArthur makes this observation on Japan.
In this post-war period of general failure to attain real peace, One of the bright spots has been conquered Japan. It is a Japan which may now assume the burden of preparing its own ground defense against predatory attack, and thus, in short time, release our own beloved divisions or return home.
Flash floods that accompany torrential rains make life rugged for this Greek contingent of United Nations forces fighting communist aggression in Korea. Waist deep in water, these veteran Red fighters who've never fled from communist attacks find it strategically wise to pull up stakes now. Nature's a real tough foe. Over northern Korea, rain-filled clouds fail to impede a bombing mission of U.S. Air Force B-29s. A marshalling area of Pyongyang, North Korea capital, being plastered in spite of occasional flak from Red anti-aircraft guns. An emergency truck wheels to the runway to meet a returning sky giant that was slightly damaged by the fire from the ground. The hits were superficial, however, and although the tail of the big ship is pretty well riddled, not even the tail gunner was hit. Just a laugh for these dauntless airmen. Atu, the weird Earth visitor in the 20th Century Fox film The Day the Earth Stood Still, learns a quaint Earth custom. He receives a certificate of merit from the Science Fiction Convention at New Orleans. It's presented by Chairman Moore for the faithfulness of the film to the best science fiction traditions.
Pomp and pulchritude on parade in Atlantic City, and Miss South Dakota bids for Miss America. Same girl in a bathing suit. Miss Indiana poses a pretty problem for the judges as she seeks the laurels of loveliness. Miss North Carolina, a bright-eyed belle of the South, sir. Right fetching, I'd say. And here's Miss Utah, 5'10" eyes of blue, a blonde enchantress whose bloom and talent places her in the charmed circle. Colleen K. Hutchins of Salt Lake City, crowned by last year's winner, Yolanda Bet-Beasy, Miss America of 1952. America's reigning beauty, Queen Colleen. In Asbury Park, New Jersey, more bathing beauties vie for the title of Mrs. America. These wedded wonders are cheered on by happy husbands. Mrs. Virginia. And Mrs. Philadelphia. And a girl, Mummy, Mrs. California. And another stunning bride, Mrs. New York City, an eye-catcher who catches the eye of the judges. Easy, Buster. Mrs. Penny Duncan is Mrs. America, a 5'7" strawberry blonde, 126 pounds of heavenly homemaker, 22-year-old mother of a 2-year-old son. How about that?
Wearing a century-old lace veil over a file taffeta and lace dress, Grace Kelly is escorted by her father to the altar of Monaco's St. Nicholas Cathedral. The moment for the ultimate church wedding that will complete a romance between the 26-year-old American and the 32-year-old ruler of the little principality. And Prince Rainier III has a smile for the vision he will make his princess. The bride's parents are intense spectators as the ceremony begins, performed by the Most Reverend Gilles Barth, Bishop of Monaco, and consecrated according to the rites of the Roman Catholic Church with double marriage rings. At the low mass that follows, the happy pair make a solemn but handsome appearance. Partaking in a papal blessing with reverence and humility. At long last, all the arduous ceremonies are over, having gone through with their civil wedding a day earlier. Only a ride through the cheering Monegasques remains. Then they're off on Prince Rainier III's yacht for Pollença in the Balearic Islands. A scene of an all-American romance was the modest Trinity Protestant Episcopal Church at Independence, Missouri. For here, in a simple one-ring ceremony that took but 15 minutes, Margaret Truman, a hometown girl, was united in holy matrimony with newsman Clifton Daniel, who grew up in Zebulon, North Carolina. Only about 50 relatives and close friends and 2 maids from the Truman home witnessed the ceremony, at which ex-President Harry Truman gave away his only daughter. However, 300 neighbors waited at the Truman home to witness the arrival of the bride and groom, approving Margaret's lovely gown of 200-year-old Venetian lace. The young couple were followed by their parents, the former president and Bess Truman, and Mr. and Mrs. E. Clifton Daniel. There's to be a reception for the wedding guests in the Victorian home, but before the crowd arrived, a traditional Midwest custom was observed. The posing of the 2 family groups for an intimate portrait for the family albums, as Democrats and Republicans unite in saying congratulations. One of the most brilliant audiences in the history of the theater attends the New York premiere of Darryl Zanuck's The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. And the 4-star adaptation of the bestseller, produced under Zanuck's personal aegis, reaps a bonanza for the March of Dimes, with Carousel's Shirley Jones making a charming appearance with Barbara and Melville Ruick, while The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit's co-star, Marisa Pavan, has her new husband, Jean-Pierre Aumont, as escort. And here are Donna Winter and Greg Botzer for the opening, which marks Zanuck's 30th year in the film industry. In Los Angeles, a tropical rainstorm fails to dampen the enthusiasm for the West Coast premiere of the Darryl Zanuck triumph. Producer Buddy Adler with Anita Louise and Rosalind Russell. The Grauman Chinese Theater opening of the film that stars Frederick March, here with his wife, sees co-star Lee J. Cobb make a solo appearance. But title rollist of The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, Gregory Peck, attends with his charming wife. There's no getting away from Texan bigness. Witness here at snowbound Houghton, Michigan, where they're testing another product of the Lone Star State. A giant snow train created for the Army Transportation Corps at, of all places, Longview, Texas. Its power car alone is 40 feet long, 14 feet wide, 13 feet high, and sleeps 4. And its overall payload is 15 tons. But who'd like the job of changing one of its 16 tires? At the Sydney, Australia, Taronga Park Zoo, there's an unmistakable air of expectancy because Mr. and Mrs. Giraffe are all set to welcome an addition to the family. It's an emotional ordeal for all the inmates, with even the tiger in a state bordering on frenzy. The stork, you may well imagine, is exhausted. For here's his heavy burden 30 seconds after its delivery, which he broadcasts with the authority of a news commentator. Mom hands out her first licking to her 150-pound 6-footer who's mighty wobbly in her first attempts to get up in the world, while he gives a play-by-play description of the blessed event, which ends on the happy note, mother and baby doing well, Papa high.
Nearly 40,000 turf fans jam Jamaica in New York to watch the Wood Memorial. And they're off. Golf ace, Nail, and Head Man leading the field of 8 3-year-olds over a 1.125 course for a purse of $50,000 added. Golf ace shows the way in the backstretch. Golf ace out front in the home stretch. Head Man with Eddie Arcaro up in a mighty challenge for the lead is forced to go wide. Arcaro then takes Headman to the inside but can't make up the ground, and Golf Ace goes on to win. Headman second and Nail third, but Arcaro lodges a claim of foul. Golf Dollface and Tony DeSpirito are in the winner's circle, but not for long, as the foul claim is allowed and Head Man declared the winner. And it's on to the Kentucky Derby for Head Man.
Having conformed to all its finest traditions, the Democratic Party, assembled for its 1956 National Convention at Chicago, is now ready for its climax. The nomination by youthful Senator John Kennedy of the popular ex-governor of Illinois.
The time is right. The hour has struck. The man is here, and he is ready. Let us go forth from this convention telling the American people that we have fulfilled our responsibility to the nation. Ladies and gentlemen of this convention, it is now my privilege to present to this convention as a candidate for President of the United States the name of the man uniquely qualified by virtue of his compassion, his conscience, and his courage to follow in the great traditions of Jefferson, Jackson, Wilson, Roosevelt, and the man from Independence. Fellow delegates, I give you the man from Libertyville, the next Democratic nominee, and our next President of the United States, Adlai E. Stevenson.
That the young Bostonian's nominee was the man of this Democratic hour was confidently predicted by the professionals, and the first ballot proved the wisdom of the tabulations. It was Adlai all the way, with never a challenge that could be seriously regarded. A triumph for party unity that buried all pre-nomination bickerings with a call that made the decision unanimous. Again, the Democratic standard-bearer, he needs no introduction to the electorate, and it can look for a campaign to reverse the 1952 decision. Speaking to the Arab League in Cairo, Egypt's President Nasser convinces his listeners on the righteousness of his Suez policy. An exhortation that causes millions of Arabs to cease work on the day the 22-nation London Conference opens. A meeting attended by Russia's Foreign Minister Shapilov here in the British capital with Malik. A pair who immediately ignore the danger of war to side with the Egyptian, charging the gathering is not competent to handle the issue. But U.S. Secretary of State Dulles isn't discouraged of a peaceful settlement, and after being welcomed by Lord Reading, he proposes to the meeting a liberal and considerate to Egypt four-point plan for global control of the waterway. A new development toward the perfection of reconnaissance from the air is revealed at Philadelphia, where a helicopter and a TV camera team up to form a unique scouting unit. After the takeoff, the controls are set, and when 1,000 feet in the air, a high-gain antenna is lowered from the belly of the plane over the territory to be reconnoitered. While on the ground, a high-frequency transmitter is set up to relay the broadcast to the receiving sets. Producing these clear pictures developed for the U.S. Navy, it's a convincing example that spying from the sky is going to be mighty efficient in future military operations.
Exotic decorations for the beach, inspired by the mysterious land of the pyramids, where Egyptian girls once had jaguars for pets. Now, with jaguar costumes, they make pretty pets themselves. Don't be bashful. Yes, designed to make the boys look up. This creation is for girls with a past, and it has pictures to prove it. Actually, these are Australian dolls modeling a new fad in swimsuits, fashions of the pharaohs, and it figures. There's one part these suits cover, the neck.
But the balcony bra line would even draw tut-tuts from King Tut. And to think Egypt would go to war over a body of water. But if this is Cleopatra, no wonder Julius Caesar.
Model airplane championships in Germany, and this Constellation looks and acts like the real deal. A Delta Wing jet job takes off and zooms around. Model designers direct their planes by radio remote control. A vivid version of a flying saucer. It stirs the crowd's imaginations. It soars in saucy flight. Launching a model helicopter, which sets a world's record by staying aloft 11 minutes. Happy landings to all. German kayak racing championships at Augsburg, and the skilled skippers of the frail craft call on wile and wisdom to keep on course and right side up. The tide has turned, but in the wrong way for this boatsman. Oh, dear me, what a bore. Struggling to get on an even keel. Swift, swirling waters defy the challenge of a hardy pilot who's straining every nerve and muscle to keep his head above water. A relentless rough current threatens the life of the skipper, but an onlooker dives to the rescue. And man, it's a lifesaver. Raging out of control for 5 hours, a fire that started in a group of buildings that were being demolished endangers Chicago's famous stockyards. At the height of the blaze, the pens are cleared, a precaution by the firemen who fear that a nearby ammonia gas tank may explode. At Falmouth, England, a raft that crossed the Atlantic from Canada in 88 days attracts the sea-minded population. A daring trio of Frenchmen made the voyage, and to Englishmen, those skilled navigators, crossing the stormy North Atlantic in this frail bundle of logs is regarded as miraculous. So Gaston Vanacary, one of the two crewmen, is hailed as a hero and is surrounded by admiring crowds wherever he goes, while Henry Baudou, the captain and leader of the expedition, is as much sought after for autographs. Naturally, Captain Baudou is staying at the Seamen's Club and has tall tales of his voyage to tell. Assembled in convention at Kansas City, Missouri, the delegates of the International Union, to which most amusement world workers belong, hear Richard Walsh, their president, make his annual report. Then, as evidence of labor solidarity, Mr. Walsh honors George Meany, AFL-CIO president, who is a guest of the gathering. Again, a must on every European tourist itinerary, Vienna, Austria is a stopover point for the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. The former Wally Simpson providing the Viennese with a vision of the latest decree in traveling togs. The man who gave up a throne for love and his American wife are on another sightseeing tour, and they plan to give the city of the waltz a complete going over. Pilgrims from all over Greece arrive at the island of Tinos to celebrate the Feast of the Assumption at a miraculous shrine for which the island is revered by members of the Orthodox faith. Many of the devoted making the journey to the holy place on their hands and knees. Over 12,000 visitors are here when the ceremonies start with a procession in which an icon of the Virgin Mary is carried abroad, to be passed over the heads of supplicants who form a living queue in the middle of the street.
one of the most solemn religious observances in all Greece. It again attests the strong faith of the ancient people. A new early warning radar plane for the Navy makes its debut at Burbank, California, and with its appearance, there's a new silhouette to be memorized by civil defense sky watchers. Note the flying saucer radome top, a peekaboo bonnet measuring 30 feet, which is the housing for the Lockheed's radar equipment. Called the plane with a high IQ because of its long-range vision, it brings increased efficiency to the Navy's fleet-protecting picket line.
Flying over hazardous country to the heart of New Guinea, Movietone takes you along on a most unusual adventure, thousands of years back into time, to a village of wild and untamed people. Our safari wisely follows native police into the tribal dwellings. The natives are known by the repetitious name of Cucucucus, and this is the chief of the Cucucucus. Most of them are addicts of chewing betel nut, which, taken with a little slack lime as a relish and topped off with a garnish of pepper leaves, provides lively pleasure. Their savage reputation is belied by a childlike behavior, but they are notorious as cruel killers. In the interest of anthropology, we record their way to immortality, preservation of the dead. A boy sits by his father, a 5-month-old body reduced to parchment by smoking over a fire. And this is the loyal wife, a penetration by Movietone into a world of the past.
Climaxing the Republican National Convention in San Francisco, Representative Charles Halleck places President Eisenhower's name in nomination.
Fellow delegates, to speed that day, for all Americans, for all the world, I now place in nomination as the candidate of the Republican Party for President of the United States the name of the most widely beloved, the most universally respected, the most profoundly dedicated man of our times, Dwight David Eisenhower.
The roaring high spot of an otherwise mild meeting, because of the foregone conclusion as to the renomination, Chairman Martin has but to make it official.
The score sheet shows President Eisenhower has received 1,323, and therefore I declare him unanimously the nominee of the Republican Party for the office of President of the United States.
The complete collapse of the Dump Nixon movement finds the youthful Californian again Ike's running mate, and the popularity of that decision makes the rafters ring. Now the grand old party's centennial candidate, Ike, is again locked in battle with Adlai Stevenson as the voters settle to ponder their decision. An echo of 1952, reunited, renominated. It's now up to us. Register and vote. A swirl of the banners of their native heaths, the contestants in the Atlantic City, New Jersey Miss America beauty pageant make an enchanting picture, which becomes ever more enamoring. Though the state and territory competitors are given something to worry about by a good-looking good neighbor. But oh, for a mirror on the wall to name the fairest of them all. For to these poor orbs, they're all divine, and anyone, I'd make mine. But the judges, who have great insight, declare for Marian Ann McKnight, a mime from Manning, South Carolina, and say, could anyone be finer? So as crown she gets from her predecessor, here are the figures that swarm to bless her. She's 5 feet 5 in her nylon feet, tipping 120 to make her neat. Roaring up from the South Pacific, the fifth typhoon of the current season, called Emma, is threatening Japan with another trial by wind and rain. And in its tropical fury, a U.S. tracking plane with a crew of 16 men is missing. A torrential visitation accompanied by gales raging up to 115 miles an hour. As most of her predecessors, Emma earlier ravaged Okinawa, repeating the widespread havoc shown here where damage amounted to tens of millions of dollars. The natives take the blow in stride, but reports from the once embattled island say Uncle Sam's base there is going to have a titanic job repairing all the damage and issuing coverings. On a tour of Soviet Russia, 300 Germans are allowed to stroll on all the better boulevards of Moscow under the supervision of a politically reliable in-tourist guide, with the Kremlin seeing to it that what they see has political significance. But some of the sets are so blatant they fool only the most naive. Later, herded in buses, they're taken to the Russian automobile industry building, but we bet they're not told that only commissars command cars in the workman's paradise. A muddy brook at Runde near Marburg, West Germany, sends rural school teacher Eitel Glatzer into the international spotlight. And with a fellow pedagogue, he reenacts the discovery which won him overnight anthropology fame for a group of his young students. The finding of a well-preserved skull, which Professor Edward Jacobshagen, anthropologist of Marburg University, says is that of a Neanderthal woman, a lady who lived 120,000 years ago. 100 years after the finding of the original Neanderthal Conan, his mate. A science sensation.
Deep in the jungles of New Guinea, Movietone takes you on an expedition along the mighty Sepik River, where sorcery and sudden death are daily companions, a place where life is held cheap, where the brush is a world of mystery except to the primitive savages. Each house is raised on stilts as protection against the wicked river, with grotesque idols to ward off evil spirits. Convinced that their idol really lives, they offer betel nut for his approval. The center of their social life is at the men's club. Towering 80 feet into the air, its engineering accomplishments belie their cannibalism. And here's another advancement for these people of the Stone Age. Why, they're hip to the rock and roll. Just like our cha-cha cats today, they dance to drive their spirits away. I mean, gone, man.
Shirley Fry and Althea Gibson, national tennis singles finalists. Miss Gibson serves at Forest Hills. Miss Fry is in the near court. Miss Gibson in the far court. Miss Fry serving. She's been trying for this title for 16 years. Match point, Miss Fry wins. Women's national tennis champion, Miss Shirley Fry. Congratulations. Ken Rosewall and Lou Hode make for an all-Australian clash in the men's finals. 21-year-old tennis titans. Ken Rosewall, Australia's #2 player, a master of the racket. A stroke of genius, featuring a brilliant backhand. Hode, in the near court, is rated #1 in Australia, a power player. Hode is seeking a tennis Grand Slam, having won the Wimbledon French and Australian titles, but Rosewall upsets Hode. And from former Governor Dewey, Rosewall accepts the cup, emblematic of United States tennis champion. Congratulations. It's winter sports time in Australia, and ski enthusiasts get a windfall of a snowfall. The ski lift takes them up, in fact, 5,000 feet up above sea level on Mount Buller. And then it's a ski run for fun. Weekend skiers from Melbourne exult to this skiing paradise. Downhill plummeting, an exciting outing against nature's breathtaking grandeur. Nearly 65,000 fans jam Yankee Stadium for Game 5 of the World Series. Action highlights, fourth inning. Sal Magley pitches to Yankee slugging star Mickey Mantle. It's a line drive, rocketing to right. Going, it's gone. Mantle, Major League home run star of 1956, hits his third in this series, his eighth in fall classic competition. Magley, Dodger pitching ace, works on Hank Bauer in the sixth inning, but Bauer connects for a single to score Andy Carey with the Yankees' second run. Magley is then touched by Joe Collins for a single that sends Bauer racing to third, and the Yankees have the makings of a big inning with Mickey Mantle coming to bat and only one out. Mantle rips a scorching shot inside the bag at first. Gil Hodges makes a tremendous stop, tags first to retire Mantle, throws home, and Bauer's caught in a chase and finally run down. Campanella to Robinson. But the big story of Game 5 is Yankee pitcher Don Larson, who has retired every Dodger batter as he faces Furillo in the ninth. A fly ball to right field. Bauer makes the catch, and Larson is within two putouts of a perfect game. Campanella rolls out Martin to Collins as Larson retires his 26th consecutive batter. Now the Dodgers reach first base as Dale Mitchell pinch hits for Sal Magley. Strike two. Larson on the pinnacle of unprecedented accomplishment pitches. Strike three. It's the first no-hitter ever pitched in a World Series game, and a perfect no-hitter. An astounding feat as the Yankees and Larson beat Brooklyn 2-0.
Arriving in their sumptuous cars, the delegates to the United Nations Security Council meeting on the Suez Canal are led by Egyptian Foreign Minister Mahmoud Fawzi in center, who rejects a British-French proposal to internationalize the waterway, a rejection in which he is supported by Russia's Foreign Minister Shapilov here, who promises a veto if need be, which brings a suggestion for a new committee to handle the emergency, which French Foreign Minister Pinault and Selwyn Lloyd, his British counterpart, here with Secretary Dulles, will consider, with Israel's Iban on left supporting the West. Pausing between campaign sorties for another Washington news conference, President Eisenhower says he never proposed to reduce defense strength.
There has never been any announcement of plans to reduce the United States Army forces. We have time and again pointed out since 1953 new weapons, new machines, new capabilities of a mechanical sort make it possible to do occasionally with fewer men. But we've insisted that every single day see an increase in our tactical and striking power. If we can do it with fewer men, of course we will do it. And we have reduced the actual number of men since the Korean War. I think something on the order since the Korean War of 700,000, besides about 150,000 in the civilian force of the defense. But never have we said we are going to reduce the strength of the American Army.
In the Poznan court, where the Polish workers who engaged in the recent bread riots are being tried, the commissars in charge offer these weapons in evidence against the young heroes, described by the Reds as hooligans and criminals. But these films of the defendants contradict the communists, revealing the youngsters as anything but vicious-looking characters. A fact, with the fear of new riots, that compels the Reds to sentence them to only token prison terms, where in other days it would have been death. U.S.-occupied Tachikawa Airfield near Tokyo, a team of Japanese government surveyors are harassed by residents from adjacent villages. The demonstration is sparked by left-wing members of the Japanese Diet, capitalizing on the villagers' complaints that they received only a pittance for the land confiscated to enlarge the base. But after a lot of pushing and shoving, the surveyors are unharmed. Some real fancy precision flying by a Czech trio marks the second annual Starfly at Innsbruck in the Bavarian Tyrol. Note the middleman. 20,000 witness the exhibition to be thrilled by this demonstration as all three invert themselves. The planes being highly maneuverable Falcos, a plane incidentally made behind the Iron Curtain at Prague.
Over 101,000 people at Ann Arbor, Michigan for the traditional Michigan State tussle. John Herrnstein passes for Michigan's Wolverines, intercepted by State's Arch Matzos. All-America Clarence Peaks carries the State Spartans 10 yards goalward. Michigan holds. Michigan State's Johnny Matsko tries a field goal. State leads 3-0. Michigan's Herrnstein carries, fumbles. Michigan State recovers, and again the Spartans press the Wolverines. Dennis Mendick takes the handoff, battles for 10 yards. Mendick again, he scores. Michigan State defeats Michigan 9-0. Movietone news cameraman went right along with the Anglo-French expedition against Egypt to be at Port Said to film the start of the amphibious attack on the Mediterranean mouth of the Suez. An advance that was followed after bitter fighting in the taking of Said and Port Fouad. Claimed to have as its objective the restoration of order in the Middle East, the action also engages paratroopers, with France contributing one of its crack regiments of camouflage sky fighters, ready for the invasion at 0 hour, which a British transport spearheads carrying a company of airborne islanders. The first objective is an Egyptian army airfield outside Port Said, and there's no hesitation by the Tommies, though they jump into a cackling inferno of ack-ack. The paratroopers soon control the canal zone shown below, after which the UN ceasefire plan was accepted by the invaders, but not before the waterway was closed by Egyptian sinkings of blockade ships. Shocked by the brutality with which the Kremlin's armed might crushed the Hungarian uprising, the Soviet monument in Berlin is made the scene of a violent students' protest, an anti-communist youth movement that is sweeping the world as the result of the pictures and reports of the Soviet atrocities in Budapest and other Hungarian communities. And the youngsters must be restrained from assaulting the Soviet guards leaving the monument. Called a day of mourning for the Hungarian martyr patriots, it extends into the night with tension mounting as the students near the street of the 17th of June, dedicated to the East Germans who fell in the 1953 uprising. But when it's feared the youths will march right into the Soviet guns at the sector line, their own police disperse them with water. In Warsaw, Cardinal Wyszynski, released from prison and restored as Primate of Poland, is acclaimed by patriotic Poles on his return to residence in the city, where, appalled by the Soviet slaughters in Hungary, he bids restraint for the time to contain the fury of the Kremlin monsters. While over the border from Hungary stream new thousands of victims of red imperialism, forced to flee or be slaughtered because someone belonging to them took up arms to escape Russian tyranny. But even as some flee because they're unarmed, reports from Budapest tell of women and children fighting alongside their menfolk in house-to-house battles.
Sailing through the flows of northern Baton Bay, a fleet of Navy cargo carriers make the last landfall of the year with supplies for the DEW line, the U.S.-Canadian chain of radar sites strung across the far north. Soon, solid ice will block these approaches, and this overseas service will have to be abandoned until next spring. It's a joint service effort with the Navy supplying the transportation and the Army trained troops expert in moving supplies over difficult terrain. During the open season, the Lifeline accounts for the delivery of 61,000 measurement tons of general cargo and 12 million gallons of bulk petroleum. A titanic effort over thousands of hazardous miles directed from this outpost for outposts. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania is again the scene of American history in the making as the President and Mrs. Eisenhower contribute to a re-election landslide that keeps them in the White House for another 4 years. A fact sportingly conceded here at Chicago by Adlai Stevenson, the two-time loser in contests with the popular right. But Mr. Stevenson, though he lost the election, takes solace in the fact he won a grandchild, and also that now, instead of being Republicans and Democrats, we're all Americans. In GOP headquarters at Washington, there are scenes of rejoicing, and the winning ticket gets an acclamation worthy of their landslide victory. A fulsome endorsement of 4 full years under a Republican administration. But as usual, Ike takes his triumph modestly and humbly to again reveal the simplicity that has endeared him to his fellow citizens.
This is a solemn moment. The only thing I should like to say about this campaign is this. It is a very heartwarming experience to know that your labors, your efforts of 4 years have achieved that level where they are approved by the United States of America in a vote. The only thing I can say to all the people, all the Americans who have voted that ticket, which puts us back into position, the same positions of responsibility, I can only say it is our earnest prayer that nothing we can ever do or shall ever do will betray that trust. With whatever talents the good God has given me, with whatever strength there is within me, I will continue, and so will my associates, to do just one thing: to work for 168 million Americans here at home and for peace in the world. That is all.
Nationalist students and crying, bread, bread, and we want freedom. The workers of Poznan, Poland staged the first great 1956 anti-Soviet uprising. It was a 3-day rebellion by the downtrodden people that won them a measure of freedom, represented by Cardinal Wyszynski's return as spiritual leader. Also a pledge from Moscow through Communist Party Secretary Gomulka to withdraw Russian troops from Poland, a promise as yet unkept. It was in Budapest, however, that the mounting unrest in Soviet slave states had its most violent manifestation. In a surge of patriotism, freedom fighters drove Soviet tanks from the city, suppressed the secret police, and freed Cardinal Mindszenty, a symbol of Hungary's aspirations. A moment of victory until the traitorous Red Hungarian commissars got over the shock, upon which they begged the Soviet commissars to send back their tanks to sack the city. Russian soldiers could only obey, though later many revolted. The betrayal of Hungary's bid for freedom by the Kremlin puppet regime of Premier János Kádár caused another dramatic refugee problem, for nearly 150,000 Hungarians fled to Austria. A tragic, desperate situation that inspired us here in West Berlin protest demonstrations all over the world. The one in Paris, stronghold of the powerful French Communist Party, resulting in the gutting of Red headquarters there by the embittered and infuriated Parisians. Seizing the Suez Canal projected President Nasser into the spotlight. The free world deplored the action, and Britain, France, and the U.S. called a meeting of 22 user nations, an attempt to settle the issue through negotiations, stymied when Russia supported Egypt. Then further Soviet troublemaking forced Israel to invade the Sinai Peninsula. Egyptians, armed by the Kremlin, were raiding her borders until the Republic wiped them out in this action. Meanwhile, an Anglo-French force unknown to the U.S. occupied the Canal Zone when a ceasefire ultimatum was ignored. An effort to ensure free passage thwarted, as you see, by Nasser. The Eisenhowers and the Nixons in the year's national election again made a winning combination, a landslide victory endorsing Ike's 4 full years. While a disaster at sea provided your newsreel camera with the opportunity to again prove the most complete reporter, bringing to the screen the tragedy of the Andrea Doria, rammed by the Swedish liner Stockholm. A graphic report of the final moments of a great ship near Nantucket Lightship, a bit of the Atlantic noted for its heavy traffic. Probing the icy wastes of the polar regions engaged our armed forces during 1956. The Army's exercise Moosehead by units from Fort Greely, Alaska, aimed at perfecting methods on how to supply North Pole outposts where the thermometer reads 70 below. In the Antarctic, the Navy's Operation Deep Freeze excited considerable interest among the natives of the region, where, making his 5th South Pole adventure, Admiral Byrd dedicated the Geophysical Year headquarters. Debut off Cuba of the USS Boston as the first combatant ship in the world to boast an effective surface-to-air guided missile system made news in the field of firepower. While a small pad at Hawthorne, California provided sufficient launching space for a new Air Force atom bomb-carrying intercontinental missile called a Snark. It automatically discarded its boosters, which, disintegrating, gave your lensman an anxious moment. After years of research, England revealed its first guided missile. Its sponsors claimed it was not a weapon, but an instrument for studying outer space, because fully equipped, it can radio all sorts of information back to Earth, revealing films showing it dropping its boosters. As England joined the Rocketeers shooting at the moon. Another 1956 example of the remarkable reporting advantage of the newsreel camera was this accident on the deck of the USS Essex. A bit of high-deck drama while on maneuvers off San Diego, California. The pilot was picked up in a few seconds as the Navy takes good care of its air aces. Still another situation to which only a newsreel camera could do justice was the windstorm at Brighton, England. A gale off the channel that roared up to 90 miles an hour. It did a lot of upsetting. Romantic doings saw Margaret Truman united in matrimony at Independence, Missouri to newsman Clifton Daniels. And film star Grace Kelly became Princess Gracia Patricia by marrying at Monte Carlo Prince Rainier, reigning sovereign of minute Monaco. The rise of Elvis Presley to show business preeminence was a 1956 phenomenon comparable to Marilyn Monroe's rocketing to stardom. And in his first film appearance in Love Me Tender, the handsome king of rock and roll disclosed he possessed a fine dramatic talent. Beauty in its inning at the Atlantic City Miss America contest proclaimed South Carolina's Marion McKnight's supreme delight, whilst at the Long Beach, California search for a Miss Universe, Iowa's Carol Morris proved fairest. Yes, beauty was irrepressible, as when England's lovely Elizabeth II and bus stop's one and only Marilyn Monroe exchanged felicities. Making his first broadcast from the Truth Center, Ike is obviously intrigued before he sends his historic message to the peoples of the Mideast.
For 15 years now, the Voice of America has been bringing to people everywhere the facts about world events and about America's policy in relation to these events. This, then, is a fitting occasion to review some aspects of United States foreign policy. I believe that the well-being of the peoples of the Middle East requires the nations of that region to build up and strengthen their economies and their institutions. We want to see this kind of progress. My proposals fit right in with this purpose, for they suggested two things. First, in order that this constructive work may go on within these countries, they must be free of the menace of international communism, which could smash all their hard-won accomplishments overnight. So we give these countries the assurance that if such a danger develops, and if the United Nations machinery cannot deal with the danger, and a threatened country asks for our help, it can count on our help. And to our people, everywhere, this pledge. With you, we look forward to and shall never cease to work for a world of peace based on justice. May the God of us all keep you and hasten that glorious day.
Wherever Queen Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh appear on their 3-day state visit to Portugal, they are acclaimed by cheering multitudes. Students pay a signal tribute, emulating Sir Walter Raleigh's sacrifice of a cape for England's Elizabeth I. It's the greatest popular demonstration for a foreign visitor in modern Portugal's history, with barefoot folk dancing for the royal pair's edification. The tribute followed by a concluding reception by President Craviero Lopez and his wife, at which Her Majesty gets a gift she mustn't look in the mouth. A most spectacular reunion in Lisbon, after which it's off for Blighty for the royal visitors, where at London's airport, Prince Charles and the Princess Anne show they're anxious to close the 129-day gap that has separated them from Daddy. Back home after their reception, the Queen's first proclamation declares her husband a British prince. Inauguration by the Scandinavian Airlines of commercial flights over the North Pole between Copenhagen and Tokyo. Air history over the eternal ice of the Arctic, where a meteorological ship gathers data near the magnetic North Pole for the weathermen of the world. Point Barrow, Alaska clears a runway for the pioneering Norsemen who made a last stop here before essaying the Pacific. Shades of the searches of a passage to India. This is the shortest yet. Here's Japan's revered Fujiyama.
Nothing makes the home more beautiful than beauty in the boudoir, and fashion enters the scene in stuff that dreams are made of. Dreamy stuff like this sheer nylon tricot, trimmed with appliqued cut-out leaves in lustrous satin. Lace-edged shoulder straps and floating jacket are softly feminine and pretty as a picture. As regal as any gown worn by the Empress Josephine, this 20th century model in flower-printed cotton, designed by Mojad. powder puff petticoats peek out from under the skirt, while a pretty girl primps for the ship's photographer. Something nice and new in nylon, and cute as a paper doll. The camisole top is cinched in by a tightly tied band of narrow satin ribbon, and tops some lace-trimmed bloomers. A comfortable combination for sweet dreams.
Pounding the east coast of Australia from North Queensland to Sydney, New South Wales, gigantic seas created by Cyclone Clara caused widespread damage. Furies to behold. Sydney's Manly beach houses are fiercely assailed by the 40-footers, which halt all shipping in the area. The might of the sea battering against rock for wild, awesome beauty. The Army's White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, a controlled test. That was an original Nike, and its powers are being compared with an improved guided missile called a Nike Hercules, a weapon that will carry an atomic warhead that gives it many times the destructive power of its forerunner. It is also substantially faster and has a much greater range, with the added advantage of being able to use the same launching platforms built for Nike #1.